Hi, everyone, and welcome to AB Conversations, where we will help you CFP your way out of it. A podcast where you get into the minds of a couple certified financial planners on how we think and feel about everyday financial planning questions and what should really matter most to you. A healthier financial life starts now.
Hello, Ben. Time for another podcast.
Yeah, let's do it. We kind of teased it. This is the third of the series, really around, I guess, how we do planning. Today being an interesting one, as the title is going to be, planning for worst case scenarios. This may be the more emotional side of the actual planning, right? And I thought to kick it off, I made a list of things that are made better by worrying, and I thought I'd share that at the start of the podcast here.
What's on your list?
There's nothing there, right? Nothing is made better by worrying. And I'm glad we can chuckle. The reality is a lot of the things that we talk about and a lot of the moments where we're called to help somebody is when they're going through a scary transition or they're having to make scary decisions. So part of what we need to do is acknowledge that, hold a hand, but then planning. What we want to share today is planning can be around, well, then let's map out something that may not be comfortable or may be scary and see how it goes. So then we can work our way backwards from that point.
Yeah, there's a couple different scenarios kind of running through my head when you said like worst case scenario. And there are some conversations that are fun, right? The worst case scenario around retirement can be potentially a little more lighthearted. Worst case scenario when you talk about like estate planning, that's a heavy conversation. So I think there's obviously like sliding scales, but ultimately it does come down to, I think part of our role is to educate, provide perspective, give a little bit of context, because I think we talked about this in a recent podcast. When our brain just lacks information, it fills it in automatically with usually negative things, right? It's the what can go wrong, or at least that's how my brain works, right? If I don't have clear insight, then I'm going to fill it with, well, this is how it's going to go wrong in my head. And then you start that cycle of just stress, anxiety. And until you kind of, at least for me, again, until you get to the point where you just have some clarity and you get some peace of mind and you can kind of set things in a box and just, I'm okay. It's a difficult, there's a lot of moving pieces. And when it comes to these worst case scenarios, just talking through it, I think, is maybe the biggest part, just to get those thoughts out of your head.
Yeah, so let's do some of that today as an example of how we would partner with somebody through this, because you're right. We need to give ourselves permission to like live in that worry a little bit, to explore like what those actual outcomes or potential outcomes could be, in an effort to move past it, right? So we'll talk, I think there's some common ones, right? There's what if the market goes sideways, it's health scares, what if I didn't save enough, my pension goes away, run out of money, like insert frightening ending to whatever you've been working towards. But let's go through it with the goal to kind of give people the permission to live the life they want to live today, having hopefully addressed in a way some future scary thing.
Yeah, and I'll apologize if I like steer us off track here to start, but this just popped into my head. So the idea of if somebody's worst case scenario is, and I hope this is not the case, but if somebody's worst case scenario is, my portfolio lost 25%, and now I lost all this money, and that's the concern, then I think there's obviously follow-up questions. Why is that the concern? Because usually there's the underlying, and I think you kind of alluded to it. It's getting to the heart of what's actually the concern, right? It's not necessarily that the markets are going down. It's that what's the side effect of the markets going down? Do I have to go back to work? Do I need to do something differently with my expenses? Those are the things that we can control. And those are the things that, a lot of people, we don't want to have to do those things. Right? If we've already, especially in retirement, or if you've already made the decision to retire, making those difficult decisions are difficult, right? They lead to things that you may not have wanted
Hmm.
to have to do. So then, yeah, let's go through kind of what that is. But I'll share too. I think everyone's definition of failure or that worst case scenario is going to be different.
Oh, for
We're
sure.
we're we're viewing failure in the context here of financial planning, which we talked about in the previous podcast. Our planning tool defines failure as running out of money before the day that you pass away. So we're looking at it purely from a financial standpoint. But for other people, it may not necessarily be running out of money. It may just mean having to make an adjustment. That could
Hmm.
mean having
Hmm.
to go back to work after I decide to fully retire. That may be failure in my mind. Or if I have to greatly change my spending, and usually that's on the discretionary side, right? That's a failure to me. If I can't be comfortable and live the life that I want to live, that's potentially a failure. So I think there's levels of failure too. But I think we're mainly looking at this through like the catastrophic, I'm going to run out of money and then what?
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that, and then yeah, we can move into like those situations or build the scenarios. But
Yeah,
as you're
yeah, yeah.
saying that, I'm thinking about a conversation yesterday with a client who was not wrong to bring up, hey, I'm still X amount of dollars. I'm hundreds,
Mm,
thousands of dollars below where I was 2 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and I need to better understand because I believe I know the situation. You're not going to need all this money. You're not spending this money right now. You're 76 years old and you're still working. You're still consulting. Like you're still earning
Yeah,
income because you want
yeah.
to. Um, but I need to, put myself in those shoes and ask those questions. It's all about what he's passing on to the next generation. So what is
Mm-hmm.
keeping him up at night? It's not the scary markets, like you said. It's not just the markets. It's, well,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean to him? This is less money that I'm now potentially leaving behind to the next
Mm-hmm.
generation, generations, plural.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
helping us understand your definition of failure, what that worry is, absolutely puts us in the spot of then, okay, how can we help? Let's build scenarios. What are those bad things? Do we still see in our planning tool successes and
Yeah,
or things that we can control adjusting, which may be, another way to put it.
yeah. So I think, well, we've already said it like multiple times now. So one of those scenarios is just bad markets, and we're kind of in the middle of one right now. 2022, bad year for pretty much all investments, risk assets. 2023, an okay year for a very small selection of stocks. And then bonds again, just kind of treading water. Where interest rates are spiking back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Depends on when people are listening to this. Bonds might be up, they may still be down. But just the idea of below expectations when it comes to market performance. What's the worst case scenario there? And typically, what that leads to is just needing to rely on your investments more heavily if you're taking withdrawals, right? It just may mean I need to take
Yeah.
out more withdrawals because the market is down, or it's you have the unplanned expenses in life that always seem to pop up, and God forbid that coincides with a situation where the market is down, and now you're feeling that double whammy, that hurts in the very, very, very long term.
Yeah, you're taking a step back. So whether it's bad markets, bad health, something goes away, employment, right?
Sure.
Plans are built around saving. So at some point, you don't have to do anything other than live off these investments. And if people
Yeah.
perceive a bad market, bad health, having to take more withdrawals as taking a step backwards, very natural to have anxiety and worries over that.
Yeah. So I'm distinctly. Is it okay to get into an example
Oh,
situation?
you do you, pal.
Yeah. It's so like crystallized in my brain. This question that you asked during a meeting was so timely, and it just kind of got to the heart of what's truly important to this client. It was the scenario around retiring, maybe a little bit earlier um, than they had anticipated, but as I think we talked about this before too, a lot of people just getting through COVID, now feeling inflation, just the dynamics have changed in the workforce, and he was considering retiring very soon. But it was, again, still all of these, well, what if this, what if that, what if I retire and the market goes down? And you just asked the pointed question, right? What's the worst case scenario to you, Mr. Client?
Mm,
What's the worst thing that you can kind of picture? And his response was, I may just have to go back to work.
yeah.
And he was okay, but he was okay with that as the solution. In his mind, the worst thing that could happen here, if the market goes down, then I just have to go back and earn to give my portfolio, my savings, time to just stay even or hopefully to start to rebound. And as long as that was a palatable answer for him, and it was, then we kind of put a bow on that. Like, if that's the worst thing you're worried about, and really you're actually not worried about it, then we're good here. You can have permission to retire when you want to retire, knowing that if things hit the fan, you have other options to well, you call that's the parachute cords that
Yeah.
you can pull.
Yeah. And I guess that's the easiest way for us to try to combat whatever worry there is. Let's actually go through those scenarios. And if you're okay with the outcomes that come from that, right? And it doesn't have to be completely pass fail. There's gray area,
Right,
right? In this
right.
scenario, I can go back to work. I can earn again. For some people, it's, well, I can just spend less. Whatever it is, those
Yeah,
all fall under the
yeah,
same camp to me. Um, just the idea on how to combat it. How does planning for worst case scenario help? It lets you actually see potential outcomes as opposed to feeling this risk of the unknown.
yeah. Yeah, and as I said earlier, a lot of this process is really just exploring what those potential pathways are. That if we come to a fork in the road because something needs to change, well, then let's just talk about what those options are, and then you can kind of rank them, or clients can quickly off the bat say, nope, I I don't want to have to go back to work. What are our other options?
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, we're just hoping to build those plan B type ideas that shouldn't ever need to occur. We've already had the thought, right? We've gone through the thought exercise of what may work, what may not, in those different scenarios. Yeah, go ahead. I was going to
Well,
pivot.
I'm thinking the other side to this coin. It's not. I'm thinking back to this like analogy of, okay, you're something's keeping you up at night. People tell you like, go write it down, just get it out of your head.
Mm-hmm.
Another way for us to combat this is to do this worst case scenario planning and help somebody realize that they may not need to do anything different.
Right.
It's just playing out that scenario, or maybe we like to call it like mental accounting or bucketing. It's now just viewing what you have differently to be able to say, yes, I mean, you use parachute cord. This is our parachute
Yeah.
cord bucket. This is money that we just need to view as our complete safety net. And just in doing that, just in talking through that, feeling like you have this built-in buffer,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen that really work for people to just
Yeah.
feel better about their situation and therefore be able to take the next step to whatever they weren't doing because they were worried, right? I wasn't
Yeah.
going to gift to my kids, or I wasn't going to gift to charity, or whatever it would be.
Yeah, and that's the perfect example of where we can often be our own worst enemy, right? We can create these hurdles for ourselves that when you take a step back and maybe with some additional advice or expertise or just somebody who has a different perspective, and in this instance, right, it's us, where we've talked to so many people going through this. We have some experience to rely on where, this client may have built up this hurdle in their head. If my pension goes away in retirement because the company is no longer
Mm,
solvent, right? What do I do? Where's my cash flow going to come from? How am I going to replace that? It's just like getting to retirement a second time, right? How am I going to replace
yeah.
that paycheck? And just being able to talk through it again, just coming up with, okay, if this happens, then XYZ is kind of next in line for our solutions. Then it just, again, I hope it allows people to just kind of put it in a box and hopefully not worry about it as much. And obviously, there's everyone to a certain degree has their control of worries, some better
Yeah.
than others. But we hope that it at least gives some flexibility to not be as stressed if as you said, if there's nothing that we would do differently, we still think you're going to be okay. It's just sharing that information and hoping that it does sink in.
Yeah, or and in this case, I love this example that you shared, like the pension going away. I mean, we both remember that high level of planning that we needed to do that now is the
Yeah.
basis for our work every year with this client. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it it was taking the very next important step to not just go, hey, you paid us, we're the professionals, we say everything's going to be fine, so don't worry
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
That's not going to fly, right? So it is to open
Prove it.
ourselves up to go, yeah, then let's create. And this is where a little creativity comes. It's putting ourselves in their shoe, understand their history with money,
Mm-hmm.
why this might be a stressor, why this might be a worry. It probably comes from some other past experience to
Mm-hmm.
now be able to again combat it. So
Yeah.
in this case, didn't need to do anything different, didn't need to save more, don't need to do that.
Yeah.
But now we've mentally bucketed, assets in different ways to be able to allow them to live the life they want to live right now and do what
Yeah.
they want to do and still feel secure if this horrible plan B scenario came to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one that just popped into my head when you said, coming from the personal experience side of things, we hear from clients getting to retirement now or retiring, worried about healthcare. And not
Sure.
necessarily just the rising cost of healthcare, but what if something bigger happens? I need long-term care, right? I'm in a facility, or I need a higher level of care. And we're seeing it's the sandwich generation that are still caring for aging parents, maybe still have kids, or hopefully adult kids that are more independent at that point, but they've probably seen or have some experience with long-term care or end of life healthcare. And that's a big concern for people. And it certainly is or can be a hugely impactful event to someone's finances. I mean, it's not cheap. Everybody knows the cost of healthcare, and especially long-term care is probably not going down anytime soon or ever again. But there are ways to potentially transfer some of that risk. So, just the idea of thinking, well, if I need long-term care and it's going to cost $100,000 a year plus, how am I going to pay for that?
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about this in other podcasts. Sometimes it is just that mental accounting. If they're not yet retired, it could just be, well, here's a type of insurance that's may not necessarily solve the problem completely. Like it's not just going to pay for every single cent of healthcare expenses, but it can greatly offset some of the costs. And by the way, keep your other assets intact just by working, an extra whatever amount of time can
Mm-hmm.
mentally account for the cost that could come from that. And we've seen that happen where it's just connecting those two dots. This is a concern of mine, long-term care costs in the future. What can I do today to at least account for that possible scenario? What can I
Yeah.
do? Is it save more? Is it buy insurance? Whatever that may look like. Again, I think it's just talking through the options and trying to connect some dots so that at the end of the day, the client says, I'm worried about long-term care, but now I have a plan in place, or at least have options to go to if and when that should occur.
Yeah. Pass the risk. Make it somebody else's problem. Uh, in this example that you're sharing, like planning for worst case scenario is now taking away that worst case scenario that I need this and don't have the money for it. Like
Yeah.
that is one that you may be able to just completely let go of if you're able to
Mm-hmm.
just pay for the coverage.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, are there other scenarios, or do you want to kind of just button this up?
I think I'm good. Do you have other scenarios?
No, I
We
think we
hit on a
proved.
few.
Yeah, hopefully we proved the point, though. I mean, part of life is just understanding that we can't know what is going to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
that can be scary. But we want to be clear, at least working with us, we can and we should still prepare for some of those things that may happen or outcomes that could happen. And if nothing else, just be able to talk through it, even if it's a little uncomfortable, so that we can, if we need to, just prepare differently. Right. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of good that I think can come out of that for our clients.
Yeah. And I'll say one last thing. Sometimes it goes the other way too, where it may not necessarily be a concern on the client
Hmm.
side, but that could be that, you put the blinders on, and I'm not worried about taking excess withdrawals, or I'm not worried about the cost of long-term
Mm,
care. And it may need to be us just raising that as a potential, not as a potential worry, but we would want to see a plan in place that should anything occur, that we still feel as good as maybe you do in the moment, so that those things don't come out of left field. And now it's well, oh crap, we didn't plan for this.
right.
I wasn't
Right.
worried about it then. I was young and healthy, but now here I am worried about it. And now it's too late to actually do anything about it. So sometimes it can work in reverse, where the clients may not have a concern about it, but let's just check the box just to make sure we go through the exercise and make sure that there's nothing that would need to change either.
And that's really well put, because the point we're trying to make is it helps us both. It helps the relationship. If it's minimizing stress and the damage that can cause on your end, that's one thing.
Yeah.
On the other side, it's helping educate us to know what options we can, put in place for you, or how we should talk about this when the next thing comes up that you're a little
Yeah.
worried about, right? How
Yeah.
you operate, how your rational brain works, under good times and certainly some of the bad. So
Yeah.
hopefully this is
Yeah.
helpful. Planning for worst case scenario is the other side of planning. Yes, you have goals or you have things that you want to get to. Let's
Hmm.
also make sure we're covering all bases if things go sideways
Yeah.
in your mind
Yeah.
or in the plan.
Yeah. Well said.
Hey, thanks, pal. Let's
Yeah.
do this again sometime.
I'd say maybe in like a week and a half.
All right, that sounds good. I'll check my calendar.
Hey everyone, Adam and I really appreciate you tuning in. Please note that the opinions we voiced in this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be most appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, your accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to making any decisions or investing. Thanks for listening.